Hey, what's going on, everybody? Logan Arliss here, Illinois Aviation Academy, coming to you live for another Webinar Wednesday. Hopefully you guys are enjoying your Wednesday, so I'd like to thank you guys for joining us. And I've got a few announcements to make from the Academy. We have Mr. Dan Bakuvka, who completed his first solo, so congratulations, Dan. And also Mr. Adam Gerlach, who completed the trifecta. So he got his private, his instrument, and his commercial all through the Academy, which earned him his own Illinois Aviation painted Cessna 172. So congratulations, Adam. Congratulations, Dan. Keep up the good work, guys. Today we're going to be speaking with Mr. Robert Rockmaker of FSANA. And Mr. Rockmaker has spent his lifetime in aviation. So he has 47 years in the aviation industry. He's soloed at 16 years old. He was licensed when he was 17. He is a commercially rated pilot, and he's got his instrument, his multi, his glider, seaplane ratings. He has a Bachelor of Science in Air Commerce, an associate's degree in air transportation. He spent 10 years as an airport management for Abe Airport, which is out in Pennsylvania. It is now called Lee Valley International. And he has been the executive director of the Aviation Council of Pennsylvania from 1989 to 2013. And he is an accredited member of the American Association of Airport Executives. Now, he is also the founder and the CEO and president of FSANA. And FSANA is the Flight School Association of North America. And it's a industry association which is dedicated to the business of flight training. So really excited to be speaking with Robert. This is right up our alley. Illinois Aviation Academy has been an accredited school through FSANA since nearly since its inception in 2009. So excited to bring them to you. If you guys have questions, remember you can comment below. We are following the feed. So please ask questions and we'll get to them throughout the webinar. So let me go ahead and bring Mr. Rockmaker on. Hey, Bob. Oh. Hello, sir. Looks like his audio's connecting here. Hey, Mr. Rockmaker.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good, Logan. I'm good.
Very good. Well, I want to do just thank you for taking the time out of your night tonight to help us share the aviation word.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Glad to do it for Illinois Aviation Academy and Chicagoland and beyond.
Yes, sir. Well, we appreciate it. So I was telling our guests about your bio and how you are the founder and the CEO and president of FSANA. And so I was wondering if you could share a little bit of how did FSANA come to be, and as well as its purpose that it serves.
Well, I'm going to try to give the short story. It's an interesting story. Back in the late 90s, I was the director for a state aviation association, and we were running an annual tri-state flight school conference. And we were into our 5th year of doing it. It was for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, and it was a lot of fun, and it was to help the flight schools in the tri-state area to improve and do better. And this is before FSANA. This is before FSANA. So, so what happened was in 2001, we went to Orlando. We took that conference seminar on the road. And subsequently, we had a good conference. Several national organizations had suggested to our state group that we take it national. So we did that in April of 2001. And of course, I'm sure all of your listeners know that September of 2001, we had a horrific set of attacks on America. All flight schools were closed. And at that time, there were 2,400 flight schools roughly in America. Just to give the audience a little look back, 2,400 flight schools. After the attacks and things settled down, we ended up with 1,600 flight schools. And I was busy doing my work, but I always felt there was a need to have an association dedicated to the flight training industry. And so I said to myself, when my children get a little older, maybe I'll have a little more time and we'll see if there's a need, if someone hadn't already started it. And the rest is history. And in 2009, a group of flight school folks from around the country came to Philadelphia at Atlantic Aviation, and we met all day with an agenda. And from that meeting, we started out. And at that time, the economy was not doing very good. And several of those folks that came to that first meeting said, do you really think this is a good time to start a new enterprise? And I said, well, my mentors have always taught me when the elevator's all the way down on the ground floor, there's nowhere to go but up. And so I kind of relate that even to where we are today, you know, with the virus. And I'll certainly get into that a little bit later on here, you know, as we go through this, Logan. But, you know, this is a great time to either begin or to continue your training, whether you want to be just a regular general aviation pilot or your goal is 0 to hero. So that's the history of how FSANA came to be. And, you know, we're now 11 years old. We continue to grow with great members like Illinois Aviation and many other flight training schools around the country and wonderful supply chain partners. So we're really excited. We are about to launch a new website very, very soon, and it will be a very big benefit for the general aviation industry as well as for people that are interested in learning more about aviation. So that's a quick snapshot.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So being a member of FSANA, could you tell us a little bit about the highlights and the key functions and benefits that are received from being an accredited flight school member of FSANA?
It really boils down to this. Logan, and to your listeners, in every industry vertical market, there's normally some type of industry association, but there was never one of those industry vertical associations for the flight training industry. Schools like yours, you know, pay your annual membership dues, and what you get, and your founder, and you know, Bob Werderick knows this very well, your CEO, that you know we're there when there's something that you need behind the scenes. You know, the trade association is there to try to work through or help a school work through any number of issues that can come up in the day-to-day operation or the year-to-year operation. We're there to help advocate for the industry. We're helping schools guide. The last 10 weeks have been the busiest since inception of the trade association. We have helped numerous flight schools work through the virus problems, guide them. Our job is not to run your business. Our job is to be here and to give information to help people like your owner and yourself and your team to run a good operation, a good, safe business operation for your customers and prospects. And we've really come through the busiest time since this organization was founded. I won't say that I'm tired, but I'm looking forward to getting back to a little more of a normal pace. It has the number of emails and phone calls since we came back from Las Vegas, which is where we had our annual conference this year, was just incredible. It couldn't be handled, all in one day by one or two people. And so we're very proud of what we've done. We've worked long hours. We've worked Sundays, Saturdays. Some of the largest flight schools in the country were helped by FSANA. And I say that, not in magnitude of scope of anything in particular, but there are schools that have 10 aircraft, 25 aircraft, 50 aircraft, 100 aircraft or more. And some of the largest schools have come under our support and guidance through this. And it's very humbling to be able to help everybody. And every member is important, whether they have 2 or 3 aircraft or they've got 50 aircraft or 100 aircraft. We don't discriminate based upon anything, including the size of the school, etc. So I think that's a good way of summarizing what we do. We have committees, and members get to sit on committees. We're forming an accreditation organization, which will lead to permanent flight training funding for the first time in the history of flight training since Orville and Wilbur, because we know there's a need for money. And that is moving along very nicely right now. We're working with the United States Department of Education. Very exciting. We're probably another 14 to 18 months before that'll get completed, but it's been a long road, a lot of work, a tremendous amount of work, but it'll be well worth it, especially for those schools that decide to go all the way through and become fully accredited. They will be just like a hairdressing school, a truck driving school, any other kind of vocational school. Flight training and flying airplanes is a vocation. You don't need to wear a suit and tie. Nothing wrong with that, but you can definitely have a great career in aviation, going forward by getting your pilot certificates and moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that would be huge, the financial aid. So fingers crossed, we'll be keeping an eye on that one for sure. But yeah, you guys have been very busy through the whole global pandemic, and getting legal interpretation to help flight schools such as our own, be able to continue to operate and be deemed essential throughout the time that we had. So why was it so important that flight training continue? That flight training didn't just pull the e-brake and come to a complete stop during the whole pandemic situation?
So I think it's important for everybody that would be either on this call or maybe even watching a recording later on to understand that the CDC had guidance well before this virus ever came to America. The CDC is the Cyber Infrastructure Committee, and it is a part of the TSA, or the DHS, actually, the Department of Homeland Security. And this was all in place. This was not something we lobbied for once the virus came here. This was in place, in writing. And we were fortunate enough to know about it. That's our job, to try to know what's going on and be aware. And so we shared that information with the flight training community. And it was up to each school, including yours, to decide what you were going to do. You know, were you going to close down totally? Were you going to be partially open? It wasn't up to us as a trade association to tell any flight school how to run their business. And why was it important? Because all airmen, including airline pilots, corporate pilots, EMS pilots that fly, you know, emergency patients to trauma centers, for example. Angel flights, everybody knows Angel flight. They take you from point A to point B. It's not technically a medical transport, an air medical transport. There's no, there's no doctors, physicians, etc. on board, but they'll fly you to places like the Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Clinic, and other, very significant medical institutions around the country at no charge. Those are volunteer pilots, but they need their flight reviews like anybody else. Every airman needs a flight review. Airline pilots get flight reviews normally when they're in the simulators. Their instructors can sign off on that type of scope. But without having any of that activity available, the entire system just shuts down. And in addition, the general aviation fleet can be used, and it was used a little bit in the virus, the time when the virus was really at its worst. There were various pilots with their aircraft, GA pilots, that were doing some flying to move, medical supplies and things like that. And FSANA actually offered our flight schools. We went out to our flight school community and offered the president at the White House, if he needed some support with some light aircraft. You can't take large transport aircraft into 3,000 and 4,000 foot runways. You can't take C-17s and C-5s. It just doesn't work. But you can certainly take in Cessna 172s, 182s, Piper Warriors, Beach Bonanzas, etc. And so we made that offer. They did not take us up on it, which was fine. But, we're part of a national air transportation system. I don't know if your viewers know this or not, but the airlines of America all fall under what is termed in the federal government the Civil Reserve Air Fleet, CRAF. You can Google it and see. In times of emergency, the administration, the president, and his folks down there in DC can hit a switch, so to speak, and the airline aircraft of America literally turn into military transport. It's called the Civil Reserve Air Fleet of America. And that didn't happen. That didn't really happen this time. I think they were giving some thought to it, but it wasn't needed. It just wasn't needed. And there were enough airline pilots still willing to fly. As you know, there was quite a bit of international carriage of some of the PPP that needed to go back and forth, the protection equipment from China and other countries that were supplying it into America, because we ran a little short in some of those categories. And not only FedEx and UPS, but some of the domestic air carriers, the 121 carriers, also turned some of their aircraft, because they weren't really flying passengers, into air cargo, as you all know. And but again, the U.S. government did not officially turn on the Civil Reserve Air Fleet, to the best of my knowledge. So that gives you, I think, a little background why it was important. And again, it was up to each flight school to determine, are we open or are we closed? What are we going to do? There were many airmen who were close to taking their flight tests. Can you imagine a candidate for their very first pilot check ride, the private pilot check ride, and they were going to be taking it, let's say March the 1st, or March the 15th, a little bit later into March. And all of a sudden, they can't rent an airplane from you. Even if they had an examiner, if you were closed, they couldn't get an airplane. So now we have March 15th to April 15th, May 15th, June 15th. Okay. I mean, we're 3 months. You cannot take a student pilot, for the most part, and park them on the ground for 3 months, and then just put them in an airplane and go out and take a check ride. Doesn't happen. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. So as a result, there were some schools that tried to, do their best to have some level of operation. And we're pretty sure that roughly 30% or so of the schools, had some level of activity. Not everybody closed. We figure about 65 to 70% of the schools totally closed for some point in time. And actually, we just completed a survey. Just completed a survey, and the results are being tabulated. I looked through it quickly tonight, just for a couple key areas, but I just didn't have enough time to really get into it because the survey just closed the other day. And so we will be publishing those results on our newsletter that comes out probably next week. We'll have our next newsletter come out, and it'll be in there as well. But it'll be very revealing, I think. And it was a good survey. We had a good response. So I think we'll have a pretty good pulse on what's happening in the industry.
That's great. Yeah, we'll look for that newsletter. Definitely. I'm interested to see how the results come in. But yeah, that would have been detrimental to a student, like you're saying, a student pilot that just invested so much time and effort, to have to take a back seat to that. And then you kind of led into my next question, which is the issue that, and we were facing this issue even before COVID had struck, was the lack of DPEs in the area. And so, it's becoming harder and harder to find an examiner for a check ride. I mean, you're trying to, foresee the future and planning with your students, just to get a check ride plan for 2 months in advance, with an examiner. And then, you got to hit that mark. If you don't hit that mark, now you're looking at another month, 2 months into the future from there.
Right.
But now with the COVID situation, I know that the examiners were allowed to continue giving check rides, but many did not do so for personal reasons. And so now I think that this backlog has gotten so much worse. We can't even find an examiner to do a multi-engine check ride in our Aztec for our multi-engine students currently. So where have you been seeing this, and what potential solutions may you have for this problem that we're facing?
Okay, so I'm going to try to capsulize this. FSANA 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, started a industry working group with the FAA to address this issue. And we've had multiple meetings, both telephonic as well as in person, to move the ball forward. Just a few years ago, there were about 1,400 examiners in the country. Today, there's about 850. So the industry is down, not quite half, but pretty close to half. And what we all agreed to within this working group, this industry working group, including, AOPA and, NBAA and HAI, the Helicopter Association. In fact, Matt Zuccaro, who passed away, the former CEO, he was so passionate about this project that Matt himself actually joined those calls. And that was quite an honor to have the CEO of the Helicopter Association, who was one of my mentors, actually come on these calls and participate, because he saw the problems as well. And right now, through the industry working group, we've been able to accomplish what we call geographic expansion. So today, an examiner anywhere in the country is permitted to travel. They do not have to wait to get a blessing from their local FSDO manager. They can pick up and they can go do check rides anywhere they want to. That was a big positive move to help. Unfortunately, quite a few of the examiners are not young spring chickens. When the virus has hit, many of them are in that age range, that bracket where they could be more susceptible. And depending upon whether they have any medical challenges or any immunological issues, you know, they would opt to obviously stay home, literally shelter in place. And I have friends of mine who are 74, 75, and they have not left the house yet to this day since this whole thing started. So the examiner community, you know, has now been hit a little bit harder again. The FAA has now established a aviation rulemaking committee. It's called an ARC, A-R-C. And the ARC is made up of representatives from various trade associations, including FSANA. And what they're going to be doing, and they're already into this at least 10 months, they will be coming up and making recommendations for new rulemaking to change many different things within the examining community. And I won't go into the details right now, but that process is well underway. There are various committees that are meeting and looking at different areas within this scope. And, you know, in the meantime, FSANA is continuing to work with the FAA through policy changes, because much of the pilot examiner category is all guided by policy, not regulation. And so over the next several weeks, we're going to be calling a meeting again of our working industry committee to see again what may be possible. The other major thing that we were able to get done, the examiners were only allowed to do 2 events per day. If, for example, an airman took a private pilot check ride and there was one element that had to be repeated, that was considered one of the 2 working elements within that 24-hour period. And we all know, you know, if there's one element that has to go back and you got to check it against the ACS or the PTS, you can probably go out in the aircraft and get that done in 20, 25 minutes. And you come back and then you could still schedule somebody else, you know, if you start early enough in the morning. So you could have maybe 3 events. And I'm not indicating you would be able to do 2 or 3 initial CFI check rides. That's not what I'm saying. But a private pilot or a commercial, you know, there could be turns around the point, chandelles, whatever it is, you know, short field, you know, landing, power on stall, and you just didn't do it right, you know, or you didn't get your altitude, you didn't get your heading, you were way off your heading and you were way outside the range. So they're going to write you down on it and you're going to do it again sometime. So we were able to expand that flexibility for the examiners to do more than 2 items, you know, in a day. And I think there may be a few other things we're going to be able to do at the same time here over the next 3 to 4 months with the FAA. But the AIRAC process is a longer process. It takes a while. The results of that AIRAC, again, Aviation Rule Making Committee, it could take 3-4 years. So we are very, very, very concerned right now. We can't wait 3 or 4 years. And again, the FAA has been great to work with. They've taken it very seriously. We've got a great working team of flight school owners, managers, and DPEs, along with FAA people. So that pretty much, I think, covers that whole spectrum.
Yeah, that's really good to see that, you know, they are making some progress towards that, and at least they can identify that it is a problem.
Right.
And hopefully that, you know, a solution will be come to in the future. My next question is, how much does the flight training industry depend on airline hiring rates? So as we know that the airlines are really, really down. I think last I checked, they were operating at, I think, 16% of where they were at last year. And, you know, for somebody coming into aviation or somebody new into aviation, and they see this going on with the airlines furloughing and not hiring, should this deter them from, you know, starting a career in aviation or continuing on with their training that they're already doing?
Okay, so Logan, I'm gonna lay this right down the center line. This
All
is
right.
a question we're getting, and I'm going to be writing about it in our next newsletter. As a matter of fact, the answer is, and this is truly, I'm not saying I'm 100% correct. I make mistakes every day, but let's face it, human beings like to travel. They like to get away, whether it's 2-day trip, a 4-day trip, a 10-day trip. They like to see new places. Now, having said that, we have two types of air transportation when it comes to passenger air carriage. We have domestic flight, which means within the United States of America, where you're not crossing international borders and need a passport. And then you have international carriage, where you do need a passport and you are going to a foreign country. Totally two different subjects to talk about. From the perspective of the domestic air side in America, the domestic side is already starting to come back. That 17 or 18%, by the time we get to the end of July, is going to be up to 22, 24, 25. And by the time we get to October, we're going to be probably roughly 40 to 45, 50%. And again, this is domestic, not international.
Mm-hmm.
We, according to what we're reading and seeing and hearing, by the end of this calendar year, December 31st, the domestic air carriage could be anywhere back, I'm going to say 55, 60% on the low side, up to 70, 75%. I was on a call just today with the FAA and some other industry folks. And I'm sorry, yesterday. And there are reports where corporate aviation is now on the turbine side already at 60 and 70% on the turbine side. And so domestic air carriage in this country, I think, is going to come back sooner than international. On the international side, we're dealing with many countries who have now put in place specific restrictions, stay in place restrictions. If you travel to their country from another country, you're going to quarantine for 14 days. Well, one of the problems with that is, yes, it'd be nice to go to France and quarantine for 14 days, but you're basically quarantined and you're paying for that. The customer, the tourist, the business person is paying for that 14-day stay in a hotel or some specific area where they're not out and in the public. And I can't speak for anybody else, but I certainly know that I know I'm not interested in having to go to a foreign country and self-quarantine for 14 days. It doesn't make sense. If I have family that lives in a foreign country, and I have a friend of mine right now who is in a very far land, and he has self-quarantined with his family, but he's got family in that country. And so, it's a little different scenario. But for the average tourist who's going to go 5 to 7 days or 10 days on an international trip or 2 weeks, that trip is going to be very difficult. And that translates into one thing. International carriage is going to take a longer time to come back. The estimates are right now, and again, I'm not an industry expert. I don't like to be called an expert. I don't really respect that term. It scares me. But I will say it certainly looks like the international side of the domestic air carriage or international air carriage is going to be anywhere from minimum 18 months to even 30, 36 months before they really get back in lockstep. And that's assuming that the virus, does not raise its head with another very serious round like we've come through, and not just our country, but we've had many countries. Spain was hit extremely hard by this. And we had people that were at our conference in Las Vegas, friends of ours who are back in Spain, and they've been telling us, they were hit very hard. And other countries were hit very hard as well. But it was not an equal impact. And I'm sure all of your viewers know that that's the truth. Not every country was hit the same way for various reasons that are way beyond my control. So international has a way to go. As far as should people not start training, should they continue training? The answer is 100% yes. And here's why. Because if you're going to become a career pilot, we call it 0 to hero, 0 hours. And when you're done, you come out the other end, you know, with several certificates and ratings, roughly 250 hours later or so. You're still not ready to go to the airlines in America. So you still have a window of another 12 to 24 months after your training where you're going to build flight time, probably as an instructor. There may be some other things you can do, but being an instructor is the number one methodology to building your flight time. And I'm sure everybody knows that. And as a result, you know, even though the virus is still around, we have to know that the medical community is addressing the virus all around the world. There are researchers, the best minds in the world are looking at this, and we're going to definitely see, you know, solutions, and we're not going to be able to keep our country or any other country locked down. The econometrics will just not allow it. And so, you know, with time and investment in research, we will be back traveling, and we will need pilots. Now, what about the current pilot community? Well, right now, according to some of the early survey results that I've looked at, and again, I have not had a chance to do a deep dive into this, but we're seeing specific reports in this survey that I have right here, where flight schools are busier now than they were before the virus. There are actually flight schools that are actually seeing junior airline pilots that had just joined the airlines in the last 6 to 12 months coming back and teaching. Now, I don't want to say that that's a blessing, but we all know there's been a shortage of flight instructors, not just pilots, but we've had a shortage of flight instructors. So this adjustment may be helping flight schools, at least in the short term, because there will be an increase in instructor availability for the next several months, you know, until the airlines really get going. And in addition to that, the airlines are giving a lot of their senior pilots early retirements. And so those people are, you know, going to leave. They're going to be out the door. And as the pipeline begins to fill again, and that need begins to fill, the people that are training now in another 2 or 3 years, they should be able to slip right back in there and get to the right seat of a regional jet, if that's what they want to do, or whatever else, you know, they may have selected. Not everybody wants to be an airline pilot, but you know, we are not encouraging people to go and find another career right now. We are not doing that. That would be a big mistake for the industry. And I don't mean the flight training industry alone, but the pilot pipeline starts when you take Joe or Mary or Harry or whoever it is with 0 flight hours, and they go through this timeline and they come out the other end, and now they're ready to begin their official first job to earn money flying a machine. And you don't start out flying a Gulfstream jet, a Falcon jet, a Boeing 737, a 767. You start out, you know, in smaller aircraft, and you work your way up. And that's a good thing. In America, that's a good thing. Our airline industry has never been at the highest level of safety. We've never enjoyed, knock on wood, and I'm knocking on my desk right now, never have we enjoyed the type of safety, you know, that we've had over the last decade in America, as compared to foreign countries where, you know, the incident and accident rates definitely are marked much higher. We really are fortunate. You know, if an airliner goes off the end of a runway, so to speak, slides off because of ice, or they landed a little hot or a little far down the runway, all right, it's an embarrassing situation. But, you know, knock on wood, we've got, you know, great airline management, great flight management up in the cockpits today, great sets of procedures, standardized. And, you know, I think the industry should be very proud of itself, that we're able to operate a wonderful, pretty much on time airline industry in America. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, yeah, it's important to know those jobs are still going to be there, so it would be detrimental if this led to, another pilot shortage like we experienced not too long ago. But you're right about the instructors. The tables have turned now. We're getting instructor resumes, every day of people looking to come and instruct. And COVID has changed, the way that we've operated, and not just for health reasons, wearing gloves, masks, sanitizing the aircraft, but, we found a way to do a lot more of our instruction, specifically our ground instruction, via remote ways, such as we're doing right now via Zoom, Google Hangouts, Google Classrooms. And so I'm interested in your views as to, will this continue in the future? Do you think that the future of flight training is going to be more, remote and more using technology, computers versus, the old school classroom one-on-one instruction?
I'm a pilot. I've got numerous pilot certificates and ratings, and nothing will ever replace, obviously, getting in an aircraft and actually flying the machine and doing the maneuvers. Okay. And again, I emphasize flying the machine. To anybody that's listening to this, nothing ever can replace making sure you know how to fly the machine. Don't be afraid of the machine. It'll respect you if you respect it. And all the fancy computers and all the glass cockpit and so forth is nice. But at the end of the day, simply fly the machine and you will be a very, very safe pilot, generally speaking. Along with, if you follow the old saying, there are old pilots and bold pilots. There are no old, bold pilots out there. Now, as to the actual change of the non-flight part of education, okay, I'll be very clear. We have already been seeing that, because for the most part, much of the ground training has been done online through, King, Sporty's, ASA, Gleim. They all have this software, and flight schools use, obviously different vendors. We do not dictate what a flight school is going to use as far as their educational platform for the various certificates and ratings. However, we do feel that there is still going to be the need to have that instructor, especially for the pre and the post. You cannot gain enough insight by just sitting at a computer screen. When you have an instructor who has education and experience behind them, nothing replaces experience. Nothing. It never will. Not even artificial intelligence, in my opinion. AI is great, but it's got its limitations. And again, it goes back to that old saying, when all else fails, fly the airplane and just don't worry about all the electronics. Fly the airplane. So will we see a continuation of distance learning? Because it's distance learning. Sure, just like the post-secondary colleges. They've all gone to distance learning right now. They were forced to distance learning. If they weren't distance learning in the past, a couple of years, or they had a very light touch to it, they all had to go to it, or basically they had to close their college. And there will be some colleges, I understand, that may be merging or even having to file some type of a bankruptcy before this is all over with, for various reasons. And I hope that doesn't happen. But this has been a very tough econometric environment to run any business in this country, for the most part. But distance learning is here to stay, number one. And I would not encourage a flight training provider like your school to fully abandon that ability to sit with that student for 2/10 or 3/10 pre and post, because you can't. It's real time. You just got out of the aircraft. You just went through an exercise. Maybe the student didn't do something totally correct according to the syllabi, and you can sit there and you can rehearse that right afterwards while it's still fresh. And that's, I think, the best way I can answer it. But distance learning is absolutely here to stay, no question in my mind.
I'm interested. What is your view on using simulators through flight training? And as simulators become more and more advanced and more dialed into the aircraft that we're flying, in terms of your private instrument commercial, do you think simulators are used enough?
Again, this is a long answer to a short question. Simulators are great. In ab initio flight training, unlike when you fly a corporate jet or an airliner, the typical flight school does not have a level 5 simulator that can give you that full psychosis, if you will, of flight. For any of your viewers who have had an opportunity to sit in an airline simulator, for example, or a corporate jet simulator, it's very difficult to determine that you're actually not in a flying machine. It feels so real, but they're very expensive. What I do think can happen in the flight training ab initio category for new people coming in is I think flight schools can continue to push the envelope to get people into the simulators for process and procedure, okay? But keep in mind, and I'm sure all of your viewers already know this, the chances of dying in a simulator are about 0.0001%.
Yep.
I can't say that it's never happened because there have been some incidents, but it's not the simulator that's caused it. A couple years ago out in Kansas, there was a Beechcraft King Air that unfortunately flew into a simulator building, and there was, I think, 1 or 2 fatalities in that particular scenario. So I can't say never because never doesn't exist in a pilot's world, but I do think that there is definitely a whole lot of good simulators out there for flight schools to look at, and there's some really great manufacturers that have reasonably priced devices where you can take a student and they can go through for procedure, especially instrument flight training, especially instrument flight training, especially if it's going to be with glass, versus the round dials. And, today instrument flight training to me is you're flying a computer, and that's fine, if you have a glass cockpit. But that's the biggest challenge, by the way. The glass cockpit tends to be the biggest challenge. And just yesterday, part of the call I was on yesterday, there was a major corporation that is doing some work, and I'm not at liberty to share, unfortunately, the name of them, but they're doing work with respect to, I won't say autopilots, but I'll say more electronics in the co-pilot seat. And I asked the question yesterday, have they looked at how much can the human brain chemistry handle? And there were probably 40 people on this call yesterday, some pretty interesting people with backgrounds of different, shapes and sizes. And they said, we haven't done that yet. And I bring this up only to point out that, let's face it, the average brain can only handle so much. And the average brain can't remember everything. And that's why I said about 15 minutes ago, when all else fails, fall back, turn off the electronic autopilot and fly the airplane. And so I think there is so much merit in that. I know that your listeners are very aware of the Boeing 737 MAX incident. Boeing is a Chicagoland company now, a great company. It's a great company. And unfortunately, yes, there were some problems there with that aircraft, but from what I have heard so far, and again, this is very unofficial, we've all seen information come out on these accidents. We know it wasn't weather. Those accidents were not weather related. So if it wasn't weather related and they were on departure, a few miles from the airport, and they had some type of a problem with their automation, you turn it off. It's as simple as that. You turn it off. And if you don't know where to turn it off, that's a problem. And I don't know any more about that. I have not studied those accidents. I haven't had time. But again, it goes back to fly the airplane and worry about everything else second. And so, you know, will simulators play a role? Yes, they will. Yes, they will. In the military, they take a brand new person in the Air Force or the Navy, and within 50 to 75 hours, they're flying a jet at 350 to 400 knots. But they're also using $5 and $10 and $15 million simulators. And also those aircraft, you have a parachute and the ability to punch out of that aircraft, you know, if a boo-boo gets too big of a boo-boo. We don't have that in, for the most part, civil GA, and we don't have that in the airline category. And I don't see that. You know, we do have some GA aircraft with parachutes now, yes, but generally speaking, you know, we don't have the luxury in flight training. I know that your fleet, and I know most of the flight training fleet in America, does not have parachutes available where you pull it and come down to earth again. So simulators are here to stay, no question. Some schools do a great job with deploying their simulators, and some do a mediocre job, and then some, I think, just they kind of have it in a corner someplace, and every once in a while a few people jump into it. So there is a learning curve there, you know, for some of the flight schools in America, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a big discussion point as well, that, you know, as aircraft get more and more advanced, that you don't become too reliant on, you know, the aircraft to fly itself. You know, so I like your point there, fly the machine. Yeah. My next question for you. So why are FAA licensed pilots, commercially licensed pilots, and maybe air traffic controllers encouraged to pursue a degree? So I know that some major airlines are no longer requiring a 4-year degree. I know that the regionals do not require a degree anymore. What is the benefit of you know, a flight student going in and pursuing a degree as well? And should it be in the aviation field?
Okay, another really, really great question. And our soon to be new launched website, by the way, will be also addressing this scope on topic. The fact of the matter is, back when I was learning to fly, okay, and I soloed at 16, got my first certificate at 17, you had to have a college degree to even get in the door at an airline, any airline. Over time, for various reasons, today, as you point out, there is not a need for a college degree. At FSANA, we will certainly encourage people to, along the way, even if they have to distance learn. There are now many pilots that are flying in the right seat of a regional jet, and they still don't have a degree, but they're working on it through distance learning, whether it be at Embry-Riddle, you know, Thomas Edison in New Jersey has a program, and there's others as well. You can distance learn, Liberty University. And should you have a degree in aviation, if a pilot, and I'm sure all of your listeners know this, and your viewers know this, if a pilot is going to fly commercially, and that doesn't mean for an airline. The word commercial means if you're going to earn money to put into your wallet to do anything with an airplane, you need to have an FAA flight medical. And if you don't have it, if you can't earn it or you can't keep it, you're pretty much done. If your mother or father is the president of the airline, it doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to fly for that airline. You're done with them. You're not going to fly for a corporation. So what are you going to do? Well, we encourage people to get some additional study under their belt, not necessarily simultaneously. Take a course once a semester while you're working as a CFI. Maybe you start out at a community college and get a 2-year degree in business. Aviation is made up of not just flying. You've got airports. Airports are big business. You've got airlines with all kinds of business people. It takes thousands of people to make these aviation enterprises operate successfully. And for some of those types of jobs, you will need a degree. But to fly an airplane today, commercially for an airline, as you point out, you do not need a college degree. But I would encourage anyone to get that degree because, again, you can have your heart set on being a pilot and you're going to be happy doing it. But when you lose your medical, and life does happen like that, it does happen. Now you have something to fall back on. You have another career path, whether it's in aviation or not in aviation. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. So I think we got time for one more question. I'm going to group 2 of these questions together. So, for someone getting into aviation or interested in getting into aviation, what would be the best way for someone to gain experience? And this kind of leads into FSANA's AEROCAMP program that you have started. So what are the benefits of AEROCAMP? I know we've been running them for a long time and we thoroughly enjoy them. We have one coming up here, to a basic and an advanced camp at the end of July that we're excited for. So why is it so important to have aviation programs such as AEROCAMP for our youth?
It really boils down to one thing, Logan. Today, aviation, generally speaking, it's very difficult for anyone to get access to our industry because of all the security, the fencing, the cameras, the police at the airport. If you even stand at the fence at some of these airports, they send police out to figure out who you are, what you're doing, why are you there, and it's nice that your children are here to look at the airplanes. We have an observation area over here, but you can't be here. We need you to move on. And that's all. We didn't create that. You didn't create that. It's just the way the world is today. And so, how do young people get access to the industry? And one of the ways that we felt was important was to get our flight schools to run camps like AEROCAMP, like you're doing and others are doing. And it gives these young people an opportunity to be right out on the aircraft ramp, in the airplane, going to see the control tower, going through the airport terminal building, seeing the crash fire rescue trucks and what happens, from that perspective, learning about aircraft maintenance, walking through a shop, watching an engine being torn down in a power plant shop, a paint shop. There are so many different things that happen in our industry. And people, they don't get access to it. Just think about this. Let's say the viewers tonight are going to take a trip down to Florida, tomorrow. So they drive out to Chicago O'Hare or to Midway, but we'll use Chicago O'Hare just for the heck of it. They park the car in a parking deck. They walk into the terminal building. They stay in the building. They may be able to see some airplanes through the big glass wall looking out on the ramp. They then take their ticket, walk through the tube, the jetway. You can't see anything at that point. You get into the airplane, another tube. You got these little windows. You can look out and see the fuel trucks and the baggage handlers. You can watch them taxi. Down the runway you go. And within about 5 minutes to 7 minutes after departure, you're up at 7,000, 8,000 feet. And that's the extent of what you saw. So it's a very limited funnel that the typical person sees when they take a commercial flight. And so coming out to your flight school and being a part of it, being in it to win it, as we say. You know, they're going to be around. They're going to hear the aircraft. They're going to smell the oil and the fuel. They're going to watch them take off and land. They're going to taxi in. They're going to see pilots, you know, checking the weather, and all of these exposures. Each one of those exposures is another value added benefit for these folks to see and understand a little more about the industry and how it all works together, because it all works together. Our industry is one of the most magnificent, coordinated industries I think I've ever seen in my life. And as a result, you know, AEROCAMP is wonderful also for the flight school, because you're bringing people out, introducing them, and at the same time, you have the right to make a little profit to keep your school going. And hopefully some of these people, which we know quite a few that come out to camp, they go from basic camp to advanced. And now we have schools that are running even a third level. I just got an email today from North Carolina. They have 3 levels of flight school, AEROCAMP. And the kids are just, you know, they can't wait. The kids, when they go to AEROCAMP, they wake up in the morning extra early. They're bugging their parents to get going. They want to get out to the airport. You know, well, it doesn't start till 8:30. You know, well, I want to go now. It's okay. Let's go now. I want to go now. And it really is a humbling experience to see this happening across the country. And kudos to you and your team and Bob Werderick and everybody out there, and to the other flight schools in the country, you know, who are running these programs. And you have the right to make a little profit from this. You know, you're not making tons of money, but you're also exposing these young people to these programs. And as a result, you know, you're giving them that opportunity that they would otherwise not have. They just wouldn't have it. You can't do it. They're live and they're active, and they can just see it and feel it, and some fall in love with it. You know, so kudos to you guys, and I hope. Sorry for my passion on it, but the programs work. They really do work. It's amazing when things work. You know.
Absolutely, yeah, and it is like you said. I mean, there's no other way to get that experience. It's truly a unique, one of a kind program, and you know we love hosting it every single year, and you know hopefully we'll continue. I know we will throughout the future. So, well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate your knowledge and your insight.
Yeah, thank you very much for providing the opportunity. I've had some fun. I hope I shared some information to help a few people. I certainly, again, I'm not an expert. You know, I'm just like everybody else out there, and I learn every day and take advantage of it. And for all of you that are in Chicagoland itself, you know, there's great schools out there like Illinois, and you know, get moving and get to one of their programs and really enjoy. You know, go up there and take that introductory flight. You know, take the flight and see if you even like it. You may not like it, who knows? But most people do. Most people do, and it's a wonderful industry. Yes, it's been hit very hard. This virus has hit our industry much harder than 9/11. Not even close. 9/11 was a horrific situation, horrific. But this is so much worse. This is just beyond. I don't even have words. I don't have words for it. And you know, we're so proud. We're so proud of our members and schools that have come to us asking for help. You know, and we'll even help somebody if they're not a member, and we know they'll join. You know, we know they're going to join. You know, after the things that we do to help people, and it's about helping people. You know, if you do it from the heart, it just all works out. And so again, kudos to all of you out there in Chicagoland, and I hope all the viewers have a great opportunity sometime over the summer to do something. You know, kick the tire, light the fire, get out there and just give it a shot. And you can do it. I can tell you, if I did it, you can do it. And you know, if it takes you 6-8 months to get your private pilot certificate, who cares? Who cares? You know, it can take you a year to get it. You know, I cut grass when I was a kid. I paid my way for almost everything. And you know, I'm proud to say that. And I pump fuel. I've worked at an FBO. I've stood out there when it was 25 degrees under a 727-200 pumping 1,500 gallons into that thing, you know, with a single point. Let me tell you, you know, those are great memories. And I would not trade it for anything. It's a great industry. It's a lot of fun. And for all of you that are out there, just remember there's old pilots and bold pilots, but no old bold pilots. And just take it day by day and always be willing to learn. If you're open to always be willing to learn, you're going to have a great life, no matter what you do, whether you're going to be a pilot or not. So again, thank you so much for this invitation. Really wonderful that you invited me, and I hope I helped a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. And yeah, it was our pleasure to have you on. So thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Be well.
All right, guys. So that is it from Mr. Rockmaker. Tune in next week, the 24th. We will be speaking with a very special guest, Mr. Rob Machado. And we'll be talking about tips and tricks to flight training and flying. Have a nice night, guys.